Hi, I'm Brent Moon. I'm the horticulture manager here at the Houston Botanic Garden. So part of my role as horticulture manager here at Houston Botanic Garden is day-to-day oversight of the garden. A lot of my duties are managerial, so I meet with my crew every morning to just sort of get a game plan going of what's going in the garden. I walk the gardens weekly to make sure everything looks good, and I also do a lot of interfacing and working with our construction crews that are still on site. So we're here today in the tropical section of the Global Collection Gardens, and one of the plants we wanted to highlight today was the Musa acuminata dwarf Cavendish. You hear a lot of people say banana trees, which is sort of a misnomer because bananas aren't actually trees. They're actually a giant herb. And so to talk about part of the plants of the banana that we wanted to highlight today, what you see down here is actually called the pseudostem, and it's just a wrapping of multiple layers of leaves that grow in a spiral formation, and that's what gives the pseudostem, and some people will say trunk, that's what gives the pseudostem its strength to stand up to high winds. And so this is actually a dwarf variety. It will top out around anywhere from 4 to 6 feet, depending on what the growing conditions are. And as you can see, this one has already flowered and fruited this year. So bananas are what we call parthenocarpic, which means that they don't have to be fertilized to fruit. They will set fruit on their own. They can be fertilized by a bee or something, but they don't have to be. They'll set fruit anyway. So what you see here are the fruit, obviously. Each one is called a finger and a whole bunch is called a hand. And so these started out as female flowers, and only the female flowers produce fruit. And so as the bud grows, you see as it goes down, you transition over to these that aren't developing. These are actually male flowers. So after a certain point, they transition over to male flowers, and from this point on, you'll get no more fruit. And so if this were a production nursery or a production field in the tropics, lots of times they cut these off here, and then all the energy goes into producing the fruit. And so another interesting thing is bananas are almost all propagated asexually, which means genetically they're all clones, they're all the same, which is a bad thing because there's no genetic diversity. It makes them very prone to disease and insects. So they are propagated asexually by these little plants you see here, which are called pups or suckers. And so these are what will carry on the next generation, because each plant, again talking about the pseudostem, each pseudostem only flowers one time, and then that part of the plant dies, and then the next generations are carried on by these suckers or pups. All right, so we talked about the fact that this is an edible banana. There are also inedible bananas, and one of them we'll look up here is called the Zebrina banana. This is Musa acuminata subspecies Zebrina, and you can see it has very ornamental, sort of wine splashed leaves. This is a very desirable ornamental because it's different from the green, and as it moves in the wind, you can see the burgundy undersides. And this plant will top out maybe at 8 to 10 feet in good growing conditions. We moved this one late in the year, so it's not going to get that big now. But this will also flower and produce fruit, but they'll be very small fruit, maybe the size of your little finger, and they'll have seeds in them, and they would be considered non-edible. This is just an example of one of the ornamental varieties that's out there. This is Musa baju. It will also flower and produce fruit, but these are inedible also, and they will have seeds in them. But this is a very hardy banana. I've heard of people growing these successfully as far north as Canada. Lots of times what they do is they cut the pseudostem down, and then they'll cover it with something like maybe a trash can, put it upside down, or some people will build sort of a system around it that they can pack with dry leaves or straw bales, something like that, and that insulates it from the cold. And as long as the corm, which is the underground growing point, as long as that's protected from frost or heavy freezes, these plants can grow back and get 8 to 10 feet tall again in a single growing season, even in the north. So this is a very adaptable banana and a very good one to grow for northern growers. All right, so we're going to walk down this little meandering trail into the heart of our rainforest area here, and you'll see several other plants that you might recognize commonly as house plants here, but also these grow these grow well outside here. This is Philodendron saloom that you see with the sort of cut leaf foliage. We have the beautiful pindo palm. This is Budia capitata, which is called jelly palm. And one of the other plants we wanted to highlight are our giant Colocasia. And then this is one of our taros, also known as elephant ear. This is Colocasia esculenta. So both of these are commonly known as elephant ears. The one from the genus Colocasia is what people commonly make poi out of. So they would take the root and pound it down. It sort of becomes a sticky substance. I know it's very popular in Hawaii and with certain Polynesian cultures. And so we have 2 or 3 different varieties of Colocasia around here. Again, these are super tropical. As we start to cool off and get into winter, these will die back some, but they'll come back again in the spring as soon as it starts warming up. And there's another Colocasia over here. I believe this one is called Diamond Head, no, Hawaiian Punch. We have so many plants, it's hard to remember them all, but this is a beautiful one here. Does very well in this area. We have several Hemina callus, which are little spider lilies. They're native to this area. You can see as we look across here, we have more of the giant alocasias. We have some of our variegated shell gingers. This is Alpinia Zerbina variegata, also very common to the Houston area. And so what you'll see in here is we have several plants that are common to this area. So when we started the garden, we wanted to have a good base of plants that we knew we could rely on to put on a good show. And as the garden grows and ages, we'll do more and more experimental plants. So most of these are pretty well established and we know they'll do well here, but we will start introducing more varieties that maybe are a little on the fringe for us to grow, and as we work to increase our diversity. Okay, so now we'll continue along the path and we'll take a look at some other plants that's in the tropical heart here. One of the plants that's still looking really nice right now is this Curcuma Ginger. This one's called Bonrai Red. You can see it has this beautiful flower. These are one of the ones that's known as hidden ginger. For some species of these, they flower before the leaves ever come out. I've got one at home and it comes up and flowers and then the leaves follow. And this one sort of blooms off and on throughout the year with the foliage. And so this is a really excellent plant for here in the Houston area. Likes a little more shade than we're giving it right here, but as the canopy on all these trees grow in, they'll get more shade and these plants will be happier and more beautiful as time goes on. One of the other plants we'll take a look at here is Plumeria, which will be very familiar to most people in the Houston area. So Plumeria, also known as frangipani, they're native to tropical regions around the world, especially in Mexico down through Central and South America. Of course, you see them commonly in Hawaii, where the flower is one of the flowers you commonly use in the traditional greeting of the lei. And so these are very fragrant. And of course, some Plumeria get very, very tall. This one happens to be a dwarf growing cultivar. And so you can also see that we have it in a pot, and that's because Plumeria aren't very cold hardy. So what we'll do as it gets colder, we'll dig this up and move this to an area where we can protect it for the winter, which is something I recommend everybody in Houston do. If you love your Plumeria and you don't want to see them get damaged, you definitely need to have a plan for protecting them come winter, because if we get super cold temperatures, say 32 or below, it can freeze them and kill them completely. But Plumerias are an excellent plant to grow for the Houston area. So another plant we'd like to highlight today is the giant milkweed. This is Caltropis gigantea. This is one of our more experimental plants for the Houston area. We're going to try this one out this year, see how it fares throughout the winter. But this is sort of situated in an area where we have a few nice pollinator plants. Of course, this would attract butterflies, specifically monarchs. And then we also have the shrimp plant in front of us here, which is attractive to both hummingbirds, bees, and butterflies. So this is going to be a really neat experiment, I think, this winter to see how this comes through the winter and how it emerges into the spring. It does have beautiful white flowers. You can see a few right here. It is sort of your typical milkweed flower structure, but of course, like everything else with this plant, it's gigantic. So a very neat plant to come here to the Houston Botanic Garden and see.